Minister. Question number 6 is in the name of Deputy Claire Daly. Deputy Daly to introduce.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. Minister, this question relates to the Residential Institutions Statutory Fund and the requirement in the legislation whereby the funds which were to the victims of abuse in the industrial schools would be reviewed after a 2-year period. There's huge disquiet amongst the survivor community about the allocations that are being made from that fund, and I'm wondering why it hasn't been reviewed yet and whether you have any plans to do so.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks very much, Deputy Daly. The Residential Institutions Statutory Fund Act was enacted in July 2012 and provided for the establishment of a statutory fund to support the needs of victims of residential institutional abuse. The Act also provided for the dissolution of the Education Finance Board and was established in 2006 and financed by a £12.7 million contribution under the terms of the 2002 Indemnity Agreement. Eligibility for assistance from the fund is confined to those former residents who received awards from the Residential Institutions Redress Board or similar awards or settlements in court proceedings and who would otherwise have received an award from the Redress Board. Approximately 15,000 survivors are eligible. The Board adopted the service name Caranua in October 2013 and began accepting applications on the 6th of January 2014. The initial uptake on applications was small, and in the first year payments amounted to £14.77 million had been made on behalf of 1,476 applicants. During the past year, expenditure has increased significantly to £43 million, on behalf of 2,927 applications. In response to calls for the eligibility for access to the fund to be widened during the passage of the legislation through the Houses of the Oireachtas, an undertaking was given to review the operation of the fund 2 years after its establishment. I remain committed to reviewing the scheme. Initial engagement between Caranua and my department on developing terms of reference will take place in July, with a view to the review commencing in the autumn.
Thank you. Deputy Daly.
I suppose the problem is the Minister has just given me an account of the way in which the system works. I know that. The question is that the legislation provides for the review after 2 years. It's well past 2 years and the review hasn't yet taken place. Now, your predecessors, Minister Quinn and Minister Jan O'Sullivan, both committed to me in the last Dáil that they would have this review and would look at widening the eligibility to the fund. Now, there's huge concern here because the age profile of the survivor community is getting older, obviously. They feel that they haven't been consulted in what might be new terms of reference. They're very keen that the children of survivors would be included in being able to access the fund. This idea of a €12,000 cap needs to be lifted, and indeed clauses in the scheme about surplus money going to the Children's Hospital. So this is actually quite urgent, Minister, and I was hoping that you'd give me an idea of time frame on the one hand and a system whereby the survivor groups would also be consulted in setting out the terms of reference for that review, which is long overdue.
Minister.
Yeah, I mean, the review, as you say, the operation started in January 2014 and the review was within 2 years, so that is somewhat slipped, but it is now going to take place. The terms of reference will be agreed in July and it will take place in the autumn. You know, at the time when previous ministers made commitments, it was having regard to the maximum funds available of 110 million and a potential pool of 15,000 applicants, and the question of reviewing reviewing eligibility could be considered following the establishment of the fund in the event of applications not resulting in a significant expenditure of the fund. So it was envisaged that the maximum is 110, and it's only thereafter that new eligibility could be considered. So I suppose at this point we've only 20% of the believed eligible people who have applied, and 43 million obviously has been expended. So, obviously those are the issues that will have to be examined in accordance with what was said during the debate in the previous Dáil. So I think that is the backdrop to it, as I understand it.
That the terms of reference will be agreed in July and will be implemented in the autumn. I have to stress in the strongest possible terms that the survivors groups will be consulted as part of that process in setting out the terms of reference. I mean, one of the problems that has been articulated is, for example, the huge level of administrative costs, if you like, survivors' funds, which have been absorbed in the running of the Caranua scheme. And I'll just read you out a letter from a man who was incarcerated in a Christian Brothers institution in Galway for 5 years, who suffered mental, physical and sexual abuse at the hands of the Christian Brothers, who were charged with his care through the Irish government. And he said, "This morning I received a letter from Caranua stating that all my needs have been met within the confines of the legislation, and it's not possible to accept any more applications from me. I've received funding for things in the past which I'm grateful, but Caranua are making me feel like I'm begging, and now they've just cut me off. This isn't good enough. There's a lot of severely damaged people out there whose views need to be taken into account. They've already been abused by the Irish state and they need an effective remedy."
Well, I don't have at my disposal the full context of the legislation, but I understand the fund's role is to use the contributions of 110 million to fund approved services to support survivors' needs, and that they have 15,000 applicants. They are processing those, and there are quite a number deemed eligible for whom payments will be made. I don't have access here to the administrative cost, but substantial monies have been paid out, and I'm sure it has been done to the most efficient way. But notwithstanding, obviously, people's applications have to be processed, and I'm sure they're managing it as efficiently as possible. I will ask those putting together the terms of reference to consult with others who would be interested in the appropriate terms.
Minister Code, I think that's absolutely critical. I mean, these people were denied a voice in their youth, and it is really rubbing salt in the wounds that they should be ignored now. Many of their needs haven't been met in terms of medical needs. Some of them have medical cards. The idea of going back to training is not something that some of these people want, because they're quite elderly. They want some of the monies to be used to assist their family and other stress. So I think their voices need to be heard, and if the review is imminent, I think it's particularly important that that will be done without further delay, because some answers that I got to parliamentary questions from yourself, Minister, in terms of the amount of monies that have been expended so far would give me severe cause for concern in that regard, in terms of how the scheme is operating. But it's critical because of the vulnerable nature of this group.
Deputy Joan Burton, you have a question.